Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Sodanandana Yamunatira Brahmacharyamna. Yamunatira Brahmacharyam. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Brahmacharinda. Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya, Asatara Sadashri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Mathura Dhama Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nirvasesa Sunyavadi Paskatyade Shatarani. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpa Chubhischa Kipasindabhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's July 11, 2025, in New Varshana, Auckland, New Zealand. A reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Maharaj Rahubinamit Jadabharata, Text 11. Are we ready? Not quite. The pen ran out. It's funny, usually you have tech problems with projectors and microphones, but every once in a while you have tech problems with whiteboards. One of my worst tech problems was in Bali with a whiteboard. I wrote everything on the whiteboard, and then I just turned around and somebody erased it. It happened 2 days in a row. And then when they brought markers, they brought the wrong kind of markers. And I'm like, this is a really good move. Oops. And we had to figure out how to erase the permanent marker from the board. Excuse me? Verse, it's 5, 10, 11. Maybe some of you have it on your phone, so we can just start. Okay. Jivan mirtatvam niyamena rajam adyantavadyad vikirtasya dristam swasamya bhavo juva iyat-yatra taryuchate samvidikritya yoga. Anyone want to chat? Adyantavadyad vikritasta dristam swasamya bhavo juva ijayatra taryuchate samvikritya yoga. Jivan mirtatvan yamena rajan adyantavadyad vikritasya dristam taryuchate samvikritya yoga. Jivan mirtatvam niyamena rajan sasamya bhavo dhruva ijayatra Jivan mirtatvam niyamena rajan adyantavadyad vikritasya dristam swasamya bhavo dhruva ijayatra taryuchate samvidikritya yoga. Jivan mirtatvam niyamena rajan adyantavadyad vikritasya dristam swasamya bhavo dhruva ijayatra taryuchate samvidikritya yoga. Jivat mirtatvam, the quality of being dead while living. Pretty ominous. Niyamena, by the laws of nature. Rajan, O king. Adi antavat, everything material has a beginning and an end. Yet, because vikritasya, of things that are transformed, such as the body, dristam is seen, swasamya bhavaha, the condition of servanthood and mastership. Dhruva, unchangeable. Idya, O you who are worshipped. Yatra, wherein. Tarhi, then. Uchite, it is said. Asau, that. Vidi kritya yogaha, fitness of order and duty. Prabhupada's translation. My dear king, you have unnecessarily accused me of being dead, though alive. In this regard, I can only say that this is the case everywhere, because everything material has its beginning and end. So again, he's agreeing with him. Tactic. As far as you're thinking that you are the king and master and are thus trying to order me, this is also incorrect because these positions are temporary. Today you are a king and I am your servant, but tomorrow the position may be changed and you may be my servant and I your master. These are temporary circumstances created by providence. The Prabhupada's translation. The bodily conception is the basic principle of suffering in material existence. In Kali Yuga especially, people are so uneducated that they cannot even understand that the body is changing at every moment and that the ultimate change is called death. In this life, one may be a king, and the next life, one may be a dog, according to karma. So Prabhupada writing that, I feel reasonably certain, is referencing the fact that an astrologer had said that one prime minister of India had now become a dog in Sweden. Prabhupada would sometimes talk about that in his classes. This big prime minister of India became a dog. So pretty sure that's why Prabhupada's writing this. In this life, one may be a king, and in the next life, one may be a dog, according to karma. The spirit soul is in a deep slumber caused by the force of material nature. He is put in one type of condition and again changed into another type. Without self-realization and knowledge, conditional life continues, and one falsely claims himself a king, a servant, a cat, or a dog. These are simply different transformations brought about by the supreme arrangement. One should not be misled by such temporary bodily conceptions. Actually, no one is master within the material world, for everyone is under the control of material nature, which is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the ultimate master. As explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Arasava Bhritya, CC Adi 5, 142. The only master is Krishna, and everyone else is his servant. Forgetfulness of our relationship with the Supreme Lord brings about our suffering in this material world. The first time I heard Srila Prabhupada give a class in person, he was saying how everyone is an Ishwar, but if you go up, who's the controller of the controller of the controller? Get finally to Krishna. Jivan mitatvam yame narajam adyantavadyad vikritasya drishtam swasamya bhavo dhruva ijayatra charyuchite sound dehi kripta yoga. My dear king, you have unnecessarily accused me of being dead though alive. In this regard, I can only say that this is the case everywhere, because everything material has its beginning and end. As far as you're thinking that you are the king and master and are thus trying to order me, this is also incorrect because these positions are temporary. Today you are a king and I am your servant, but tomorrow the position may be changed. You may be my servant and I your master. These are temporary circumstances created by providence. This is Jed Bharata speaking this. Is he speaking theoretically or is he speaking from realization? What realization does he have about this? Excuse me? Really, this room. Yes, he was a deer in a previous life. And before that, he was a king. He remembers being a king. He's like, hey, this life, you're the king. And I'm the palanquin carrier. But you know, a couple lifetimes ago, I was the king. He actually remembers. Right? He's speaking from his realization. Just like I sometimes, I find it amusing that at this point in my life, sometimes I'm fed prasadam first with some special preps and special plates because like back in the 1970s, as a mother with a young child, I was always fed last. They'd feed all the men, and then they'd feed the women, and then they'd feed the women with children. It's like this. You know? Sometimes you're last, sometimes you're first, sometimes you're, I was for years in the Hare Krishna movement. I was the lowest of the low because I had a husband and a child. Why aren't you a renunciate out on book distribution? And then now it's like, oh, you're Prabhupada's disciple. And these things go there. It's just this temporary thing. Actually, when Prabhupada first left the planet and we had the 11 zonal gurus, at least where I was at that time in New York, the disciples of the gurus had the status in the society. If you were a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, unless you acted like a disciple of one of the gurus, and the authorities would even get up in the temple room and say, unless people are really surrendering to the current zonal authority, you shouldn't have anything to do with them. So we were at the lowest social status, and then in 1996 for Prabhupada's centennial, people started saying, well, let's bring back the Prabhupada disciples who were disenfranchised, and all of a sudden we became like the highest status in the society. And these things are always changing. One day you're low, one day you're high, one day you're in the middle, one day you have a position of authority, another day you don't. That happens even in this life, correct? Prabhupada was very amused by President Nixon in America, who was basically forced to resign from being the president. He said he was dragged down, he'd become the president, and then it's like, but again, even in our life, at one moment we may be very poor, and then the next moment we may be very rich. Does this happen? Yeah. One time when my husband was trying to start a business, we got down to 73 cents. And 6 months later, we had enough money to buy a house. This is just the way it works. Right? So we're in kind of a conundrum because we have to act according to what our position is right now. Jed Bharat, as the palanquin carrier, he can't act as the great King Bharat anymore. Nor would it be appropriate for him to act as a deer. At the same time, we have to not identify with what position we're in right now. We have to act according to it without identifying with it. That's not easy. It's not easy. So as part of my doctoral studies, I had to take a job as a school administrator. I had to have a year like that. Of course, I'd already been a school administrator for 18 years, but anyway, I had to take a role as a school administrator in a government school, part of getting my degree. And I decided that I wanted to pick a school that was very close to where I live so I wouldn't have a long commute time. But what I wasn't thinking was that that area was a very strongly Christian area. And that people there at the school, the leaders of the school, and especially probably the parents, probably wouldn't be so excited about some Hindu vice principal running the school and influencing their children. So the other vice principal there, she was going to the same university as I was, and she was getting the same degrees as I was, and she knew me from the university where I would always go in sari and tilak. So she knew that I was a member of the Hare Krishna movement. And she was herself a very, very religious Christian. But she was respectful to me. Thank you, Krishna. We shared the same office, so I could at least relax when I was just around her. But I decided that if I want to keep this job and get my degree, I have to hide the fact that I'm a devotee of Krishna. And the way that that job worked, I was being paid by the state, not by the school. So the school could have thought of any excuse to fire me, and then I wouldn't have been able to get my degree. So it was kind of a really touchy situation. So that whole time, I was in the position where I was trying to act like I was a materialist without being one, and trying to be a devotee of Krishna without showing it on the outside. Those are two separate things. Acting like something without changing yourself, and keeping yourself without showing it. And sometimes it was really difficult. I remember going into one classroom where the teacher was wearing some kind of hat made out of turkey feathers. And I said, oh, that's a really interesting hat. And she said, my brother made this by killing turkeys when he goes hunting. And I didn't know what to say. Like, what do I say? Do I say nothing? Do I just go, oh, like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? Or the time I walked into a classroom where a teacher was reading a book to the children and saying, so who are you? You are your curly hair. You are your brown eyes. Going on and on and on like this. And I'm standing there thinking, do I say anything? Do I not say anything? What do I do? Another time, I would supervise the classrooms every day. I'd try to go into each classroom every day unless a crisis came up. So one time when I walked in a classroom, a teacher assistant was there. Now remember, I'm the vice principal of the school, 450 kids. You know, I always wore like a business suit. So I wasn't just like one of the teachers. So the assistant teacher was there. It was snack time. And she was asking the children, she said, what restaurants do you like to go to? Now, there's no devotee restaurants in that area. And while I was in the classroom, I had this thought. We have to be careful what we think. I think we have to be careful what we think because Krishna is always listening to what we think. So I had this thought. I wonder what it would be like to be a devotee child in this classroom. How would they feel with a question like this? And I had that thought briefly and then forgot it. Does that ever happen to you? You have like a passing thought and you forget you had. So then all of a sudden I found myself thinking, I hope she doesn't ask me. I hope she doesn't ask me. I hope she doesn't ask me. And then the assistant teacher looks at me and says, so what's your favorite restaurant? And I'm like, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And I said, well, I don't really eat at restaurants. And all the kids and the assistant teacher said, that's weird. Why don't you eat at restaurants? What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And then I thought, well, I'm not only interested in the food, but I'm also really interested in the attitude of the people who cook the food. And all the kids went, that's weird. And I kind of slunk out of the classroom. And I'm walking down the hall and I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Why did I feel that way? I've been practicing Krishna consciousness for a long time. I should have more confidence in work. And then Super Soul said, well, you wanted to know what it would feel like to be a kid in the classroom. So I let you experience that. But it was so awkward. You know, what do I do? Or one time I was filling in for the teacher of the gifted math class. He had gone to Japan for 3 weeks. So they had me teaching that class. It was the children who were a few years ahead in mathematics. So I think it was 3 weeks I was teaching that class. So one of the lessons was to find equivalent fractions. Now, finding equivalent fractions in and of itself is useless. It's only useful when you want to add or subtract fractions with unlike denominators, because you can't do it. You have to first transform the fractions into equivalent fractions. If any of you have forgotten completely about all this, and maybe you're very happy that you've forgotten about it when you were going to school. So I was trying to explain to the children why, because I thought, why are they going to want to learn something when it has no utilization in and of itself? So I said, the reason that we need to learn equivalent fractions is so we can add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators, because you can't add and subtract things that are different. You're talking about, you have to find a commonality. You can't add oranges and apples unless you talk about them both as being fruits. So, we started thinking of all these examples. If you're going to add buses and cars, you have to find that they're both vehicles. And everybody was all excited thinking of all these examples. And then one of the kids said, is there anything that doesn't have a commonality? And I'd been in the Hare Krishna movement too long. And without thinking, I just said, people in chairs. And then they said, oh. But they're the same. They're both just made up of atoms. And I'm like, oops, now what am I? I decided I would take a risk, and I started talking about how we're not this body and how the soul is intrinsically different from matter. Thankfully, I never got into any trouble for that at all, but it was very scary. It was also interesting because here were 12-year-old kids who were in the gifted class, and it was obvious that none of them had ever heard anything like this, that they'd never even considered that life was intrinsically different from matter. So that was also quite interesting. But my point in telling all these incidences is, it was difficult. It was difficult to be in a situation where I had to act like I'm just one of the other materialistic teachers and actually be a spiritual practitioner. It wasn't easy. It had frequent challenges. But this challenge is our challenge in general in this life and in all of our lives. How do I behave according to this body? How do I behave according to this psychophysical nature? Well, not identifying with it. Well, identifying as a soul. Well, first we can think about the fact that we've all had so many bodies and so many lives and so many different natures, right? And that we need to act according to this body, not just conventionally, but for our own purification. It's actually required. But we also need to identify as a soul and a servant, and we need to not identify with our position. I mean, like one thing that helped me in the school is I didn't really identify with that position. I'm thinking, I'm here as Prabhupada's servant. I'm having this job so I can get my degree. And so we have many examples in the scripture of the fact that we've all had different positions in different lives. I'm thinking about like Chitraketu's son, where, he had died because some of his stepmothers had poisoned him. And then when Narada and Angira come, and Chitraketu and Kritaduti are just completely in intense grief. So Narada arranges for the soul to briefly re-enter the body. And what does the boy say? Anybody remember when he briefly comes back into his body? I've had so many mothers and fathers. Because Narada says, here's your mother and father crying for you. And the boy says, where? Who are they? Which one of these people is my mother? Which one of these people is my father? I've had so many mothers and fathers and so many lives. When Srivasthakur's son dies in the kirtan, and Mahaprabhu brings him back into his body. And he also says, I've been in so many bodies. I've had so many families. I'm moving according to your will. We don't need the fan on. Is it turning just because it's off? The wind, it's turning the fan on. At first when I noticed that I was getting a breeze, I thought, these Kiwis don't think it's hot, do they? They think it's not cold, but they don't think it's hot. Oh, they can't be totally closed. Oh, that's all I'll say about that. Okay, so we have other examples in the scripture of people going from one life to another. What are some of our examples besides Jed Bharata, who's in this story? Huh? Gajendra. So who was Gajendra in his previous life? Indrajumna. He was engaged in meditation. Who was the rishi that came? I can't remember who came. Some rishi came and was offended that he didn't greet him. He wasn't greeted because Indrajumna was in deep samadhi. And he said, if you're going to be just dumb, become an elephant. Of course, Gajendra remembered some of the prayers from his previous life. Prabhupada writes in that one of those purports that in addition to the Hare Krishna mantra, we should also study other prayers so that we can hopefully remember them in another lifetime. Any other examples? King Riga, who becomes a lizard. Chitraketu. So Chitraketu becomes Vitrasura. He becomes a great demon, apparently the enemy of the demigod. He goes from being this beautiful king who's surrounded by the Vidyadhara women, having a women's Sankirtan party all over the universe, to being Vitrasura, this huge, hideous demon. Jai and Vijay, yes. What? Shikandi. I really like the story of Shikandi. I think it's extremely instructive in a point that I'm not so much focusing on today. But I think the story of Shikandi is extremely instructive about why we shouldn't harbor grudges, why we should forgive, why we should not be consumed by hatred and grudges and resentment and vengeance. Because Amba, she got to have the association of Bhishma, who's one of the Mahajanas, and she got to be on the planet with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead, this jiva's entire consciousness was focused on hatred and vengeance for something that wasn't really exactly anybody's fault. A series of unfortunate events and mistakes, and she could have just as easily have blamed Shalva as blamed Bhishma for the whole situation. Or she could have just taken advantage of the situation and said, let me become a renunciate in this life. She had so many different options, but she chose hatred. That's kind of a side topic. Anyone else? Indra became a hog. Prabhupada likes to give that example, how he becomes a hog, and then Lord Brahma says, no one's running heaven, would you come home? And he's like, but I've got to take care of my, a sow. I'm going to take care of my sow and my piglets. I can't run heaven. That's a really good example of someone who became so stuck in identifying with his particular situation. Whereas some of these other examples are those that we looked at were those who changed but didn't become attached. We have in the Ramayana, Kadamba. We have actually quite a few. Kadamba, who had been a heavenly being, and what was the first one? The first demon that Ram killed in the forest. He had also been like a Gandharva. Narada Muni had been a Gandharva in a previous life. Nalakuvera and Manigriva, who become trees. So we have many examples in the Shastra of persons, Daksha, who's the son of Lord Brahma, then the son of the Prachetas. We have many examples in the Shastra of people who had various lives. Some of them remember them, some of them don't. Some of them remain detached, some of them become very absorbed in their current life. And of course, there's many examples, empirical examples in modern society of people who remember their last lives. So there was that researcher, Ian Stevenson, who collected accounts of children who spontaneously remembered previous lives. And some of those accounts are really interesting. I mean, some of those accounts are of children born into families that didn't even believe in reincarnation. I remember one story I read was of this little boy who was always drawing pictures of fighter planes being shot down in World War II. And it ended up he was a pilot in World War II that was shot down. And his parents were completely confused by this whole thing. And we've seen this sometimes in our devotee children. I know one devotee child, when he was very young, like 3 or 4, used to say, I used to worship every day in the silver temple. Where's that silver temple? I don't see it anymore. How do I get there? So we don't have any accounts like this. Maybe some of us can remember previous lives or know of people who remember previous lives. But we've had so many different lifetimes. It also says in the Bhagavatam that the fortunate soul in the womb can remember 100 previous lives. That's a lot. And grieves, why am I still taking birth again and again and again? So we might think, well, because I'm not this, and I've been so many things, for sure we've all been human males and human females, that's for sure. For sure we've all been higher beings, devas and universal masters and controllers. That's for certain. I mean, unless you've just come here directly from the spiritual world on a mission, and if so, please forgive me. You're excluded from this. And maybe we've even been animals, possible. When I first started teaching high school students, and I talked to my godbrother Sadaputa, and I said, some of these children, when they hit teenage life, they start to doubt some of the science of the Shastra. And he gave me recommendations for different books to get of empirical evidence for a lot of the claims of Shastra. I mean, and one of them I remember was of people who spontaneously remembered previous births. One of them was a man who remembered being a whale. So we might logically conclude, well, let me not act according to my current body because it's just a temporary designation that really has absolutely nothing to do with me. But here we find the difference between speculation and the instructions of the Shastra. Because Krishna says everyone has to act. Nobody can not act. He said you can't maintain your physical body without work. So I can't just say, well, I'm not going to act as anything. That's actually not an option, to not act as anything. We have to act as something. And the instructions given all over the Shastra is we should act according to the body and mind we have in this life, even though it's not ours, it's not us. Right, and we quote these two verses a lot in our career Dharma class. Bhagavad Gita 3:35. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradharma sanustitat swadharme nidanan shreya paradharma bhayavaha. Paradharma is someone else's dharma. Swadharma is our own dharma. Krishna is saying bhayavaha. He says if you do someone else's work, then your work becomes a vehicle of fear. And he says almost exactly the same thing in 1847. First two lines, exactly the same. Shreyan swadharma viguna paradhamma swanustitat. Same two lines. Swabhava niyatam karma kurvam napnoti kilbisham. This is also very interesting at the end of this verse, where Krishna says, if you do your own duties, you're not going to be entangled by sin. And when we were researching and writing Career Dharma, and we were looking at the relationship between the modes of nature and the various types of work, and we especially looked at this verse, that when you're doing your own work, you're going to know how to do it without getting entangled. You much more have the ability to do it without getting entangled than when you're doing someone else's work. I mean, for really simple, mundane analogies, I much more know how to drive my car properly than someone else's car. You get into someone else's car, you don't know what this button does, what that button does. My youngest son once, he saw somebody drive into the car park of the apartment complex where he lived at the time, and just drive into the car park and drive right off a cliff and down the side of a hill. He was the only one who saw it. Thankfully, he was there and saw it, and he called the police. And they came. First, they didn't believe him because they couldn't see any car. He said, "No, down there." Thankfully, the driver was uninjured. The car was totaled. And they asked the driver, "Why did you drive here?" He said, "Well, it was a brand new car. I just bought it off the lot. and I didn't know how to work it yet, and I did the wrong thing. You know, so when we're doing someone else's work, we don't quite know how to work it. It doesn't fit. Right? You go into someone else's kitchen, you don't know where the stuff is. You don't know where the things are. Or I'm having so much fun in your house. You have this high-tech house. And it's like, what does this button do? What does this button do? And you have a button in the room where I'm staying, right? It has like blue and red. And at first I thought, oh, the blue, that's for the AC, and the red, that's for the heat. So I want to have it on red. And then you told me, no, the blue means the vents are open, and the red means the vents are closed. You're turning off your heat. So when we try to do someone else's work, we don't really know. We don't know what buttons do what, and we don't know how to work it. And even if we become expert in the skills of someone else's work, we'll never be able to really understand their dharma because it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. You know, if my dharma is to increase wealth and create a profit and create a sustainable business, but I just want to study, you know, I won't put my energy into the business. Like I have one devotee friend who started a business thinking it was the only way she could make money. Well, I need to make money. I guess I have to start a business. And she said, I hate running a business. I just want to give everything away. We won't know how to do it. Or I know one other devotee he's a scientist, and he's at a temple that has a farm, and he's running the agriculture there. And the temple president said, we're losing money on the agriculture. We're not making money. Agriculture is supposed to be a source of wealth. So why are they losing money? Because this man is a scientist and he's turned the garden into a botanical laboratory. And he told me, he said, yeah, people complain that the apples are rotting on the trees, but I'm trying to see how when they rot, they replenish the soil. I said, Prabhu, the orchard is for picking the apples for the deities and the community. That's what it's for. It's not for studying the thing. You know? So we can't do it properly. We have a particular nature. And if someone who's business-minded goes into becoming a craftsperson, then they just turn into a factory. Why should I sit here at the potter's wheel every day making the pots? That's so inefficient. Let me make a pot factory. So we'll bring our dharma into that place. You can't help it. It's just kind of what it is. I mean, even when it comes to culture, you know, I travel between one culture and another, and I've done a lot of studies of culture, but I'm not capable of completely changing to another culture in this life. I just can't do it. I mean, maybe if I'd moved to another country when I was 4 or something. You know, and sometimes when I'm in vastly different cultures, I'll get up in front of an audience and say, I'm sorry, I don't have any culture. And usually if I say, well, I'm an American, so I don't have any culture, they'll nod their heads and say, yeah, we get that. You Americans have no culture. But I actually do have a culture. It's different. But it's almost impossible. You know, you have to try to, you force yourself to act according to a different culture, and it always feels, again, awkward. You understand? It doesn't fit. And your own training, and it manifests again. It comes out again. So better to just take the kind of body and mind we have and work according to that. I was once in a class in Soho Street by Bhakti Swami, and he was talking about how Prabhupada says the blind man and the lame man, how the East and the West should cooperate. Right? That the West was blind and that the East was lame. And it was the first time ever since coming to the Hare Krishna movement that I thought, oh, I can do that in my own person. I can bring together East and West in myself because I'm already kind of a conglomeration of that. At least I joined when I was only 18. Or I thought, you know, the kids growing up in the movement, they can also do that. it was the very first time that I thought, oh, the fact that I'm a white American female who's taken up a Vedic culture actually gives me a preaching advantage. That I can act as a bridge between cultures. It was a whole revelation for me. That I had spent so much time thinking, well, everything I have is just a disadvantage. I'm disadvantaged everywhere. You know, I go out in the West dressed like this and people stare at me, and I go to India dressed like this and people stare at me. Not so much in Vrindavan anymore, but in Mayapur still, not in Vrindavan anymore. But I felt I didn't fit anywhere. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I can be a bridge. So all of us have a nature that has a usefulness in service. All right, then how do we act according to that nature without identifying with it? All right, so I get it. Whatever I have in this life, whatever, you know, my culture, my gender, my amount of melanin in my skin, my language, my particular urge towards dharma in this world, I should do that for Krishna. But how am I going to do that without thinking that's me? How am I going to do that without getting pulled down into materialistic consciousness and thinking, today I am the king and I am ordering you? So, of course, very famous verse in Bhagavad Gita 3:27, Prakrite kriyamanane gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartahamiti manyate. You're a fool if you think that I'm the doer. If you think I'm actually doing things in this world. And this very famous verse also, Mahaprabhu's quoting Majja 1380, I am not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya or a Shudra, nor am I a Brahmachari, a householder, a Vanaprastha, a sannyasi. I'm not any of those things. What am I? I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He's like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. So I talk about this many times in my classes, that we should be like a secret agent who has a cover. Just like when I was working in that school, I felt like that. I felt like I'm here on a secret mission. But we can think like that always. Secret agents have to have a cover, correct? You can't go to North Korea at the immigration booth and say, I'm a secret agent for the New Zealand government. You know, you have to have a cover story. You have to go in as something. Even devotees who are preaching in China, they all have a cover story. They go there to preach, but then they become an English teacher or something like that. And when you have a cover story, you have to be very good at your cover story. You can't just say I'm an English teacher and then be a lousy English teacher and not show up to work or something. I mean, even Rupa and Sanatan did that when they were working for the Nawab. They did that to serve the Vaishnavas. It was their cover story. I mean, Srila Rupa Goswami gives the example of an unchaste woman who's pretending to be a good housewife, but always thinking of meeting her lover. I like the secret agent one better. I think that's more exciting. But this concept that, you know, I'm doing this for Krishna's service, but it's not me. I have an ultimate mission. I'm in this position as somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody's father, or as a banker, or as a software engineer, or as a farmer, or as a teacher, or whatever it is. I'm doing that for Krishna. But my real purpose is to spread love of God. That's my real purpose. We have a whole chapter in our Career Dharma book on this called Esoteric Work of Value. We talk about how we should do work of value. We should do work that has some value to society. We shouldn't do work that's harmful. We shouldn't do work that's useless. But there's a higher level of value where I work for Krishna's company. I'm a love of God salesperson. I'm a love of God worker. And I'm infiltrating whatever this is, this business, this school, this bank, this whatever, in order to try to spread love of God. Of course, we ISKCON devotees may think of that very narrowly, that means I have to give everybody a Bhagavad Gita and some prasadam. I did distribute prasadam in the school at Christmas time. I offered little boxes of raisins and gave everyone little boxes of raisins. But we're thinking it's just like that, but it's not just like that. So again, I tell this all the time, how when we met Prabhupada in Chicago, and my father said, I'm coming to the temple to see my daughter and son-in-law, not to see Krishna, and Prabhupada laughed. He said, yes. He said, they are loving Krishna, and you are loving them. So two things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. So if I'm with my family, with my job, shopping, whatever I'm doing in the world, and I'm doing this out of love for Krishna, and then I'm just nice to people, it's really just like that simple of a thing. Why did everybody like Jayananda? I mean, he did talk to them about, you're not this body. He did talk to them about Krishna. He did give them prasadam. But they're like, hey, where's that Johnny Ananda guy? He was such a great guy. And it was the same with Srila Prabhupada. After that first meeting with Prabhupada, it was like 20, 30 minutes long. And we came out of the room, and my father said, now I know why you've joined the movement. This is a genuine holy man. I never asked him, why did you say that? On what basis? But just that little association. So we should be like that. We should be people that just by associating with us, just by being around us, that just by liking us, that if people like us, that this is what, when Lord Nrsingadev says to Prahlad, so many of your relatives are liberated. Prabhupada says in the purport, he said this refers to several lifetimes because it refers to relatives that were attached to Prahlad, that knew him, that was attached. So how am I acting in this moment to please Krishna? How am I acting in this moment to please Krishna? How am I dealing with my spouse, with my kid, with my neighbor, with the objects in my life to please Krishna? Am I remembering this is Krishna's cup? This is Krishna's microphone stand, belongs to him. All these living entities, they're all part and parcel of me. What does Krishna say? To know that they are all mine. They all belong to Krishna. To have that mood. And yes, I have some work to do here that's temporary. While I have this temporary work, let me do it to the best of my ability. As Prabhupada wrote to Jayapataka Maharaj, whatever the work is that Krishna is giving, whatever is my suitable work, let me pay attention to the details of it. Let me become absorbed in it without being distracted by, oh, I would rather do this and that. I don't think this person has a better nature than that. And just trying to make Krishna smile. I'm doing it so Krishna will smile, not doing it so my boss will smile or my spouse will smile. Maybe sometimes they'll smile and sometimes they won't. And this is pure devotional service. Sarvapadi Vinir Muktam. Sarva Upadi, giving Vinir Muktam, being free from the Upadi. That Paratena Nirmala, Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti. This is one of, Jilupa Goswami gives two definitions of pure devotional service. One is Anyabilasi Tasanyam Ganakama Anavatam Anukulini Krishna Yoshilanam Bhakti Ritaman. And then he also gives this one. Sarva Padi Vinir Muktam. Don't identify with this world. We have so many cars, right? We don't usually have one car our whole life. Maybe we've lived in so many houses our whole life. So while you're in a car, take care of it for Krishna. While you're in a house, take care of it for Krishna. But don't identify with the car. Don't identify with that. We have so many different clothes. The clothes we're wearing right now, we didn't have them some years ago, and we won't have them but while we have them, take care of them for Krishna. But realize I'm not the clothes. Yeah. I mean, it's actually madness to identify ourselves with our current body. It's insanity. I mean, even if we think about Dehi Nosminyata Dehe Komaram Yovanam Jara, even in this life, our bodies are changing drastically. Yes. If we put on the wall everyone's baby pictures, it might be difficult to figure out whose baby picture is whose. Especially if you had like 200 people, we could try this at a Sunday feast, you know, have a few hundred people, ask them all to bring their baby pictures and put them up and see if you can match them. It would be very difficult. There was a photograph taken of my husband, myself, and our two older children. Our youngest son was not born yet, on the roof of the old Manhattan Temple. And I remember some years ago, probably 20 years ago, showing this picture to someone. I said, here I am on the roof. It's a picture, it's a group picture of many different devotees. And she looked at it and she said, which one are you? Even in this life. So that's insanity to say, I am this, I am that. Just because we have to act according to it doesn't mean that that's who we are. But always think, Jivera Swarapaya Krishnara Nichidas. I am Krishna's servant. I am Krishna's servant. I work for Krishna's company. I work for the love of God company. And do our work just to please Krishna, who's the real master. Why was Jed Bharata carrying this palanquin? He wasn't trying to please King Rahugana, absolutely for sure. He's thinking, I'm doing this to please Krishna. King Rahugana is the king. He's the representative of Krishna in the kingdom. He's asked me to carry this. It doesn't really matter to me whether I carry it or not. It's just the body carrying it. So these are the kind of questions we can ask ourselves. What's driving me to my behavior? Am I acting because I want to enjoy the world? Am I acting for security? Am I acting out of pride in my identity? Or am I acting to make Krishna smile? It's a really simple question. And it's something that we can get in the habit of, like, am I acting to make Krishna smile right now? The question was asked the other day, how do I know what Krishna wants me to do? And one of the ways we can answer that is, what would make Krishna smile right now? In this moment. And in this moment, and in this moment, and in this moment. So questions, comments, additions, subtractions? Yes, Prabhu. No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment, yes. To be active. Yeah.
What is the activity? Right? We could.
Yes, but what is the activity that's suitable for me? Hundreds of years ago, that was a relatively straightforward process. Now it's become more complicated. But finding what our nature is something that's important. First of all, it's stressed all over the Shastras. And second of all, Srila Prabhupada had that as part of his desire, that we would be engaged according to our nature, that we would be engaged in service according to our nature, and that we'd be engaged in our livelihood according to it. And that's Prabhupada's desire because it's Krishna's desire. And it's Prabhupada's and Krishna's desire because that's how we're going to be able to function best for ourselves, and that's how we'll be able to function best in the society. Yes. Well, we engage our nature with Krishna. Mm. It's not an or. Why can't it be an and? It's an and. It's an and. acting according to our nature should be act according to your nature, according to dharma. Do your dharma. So if someone has the nature to be a politician, it's not just that they should be a politician, but they should be trained how to be a dharmic politician. That's supposed to be the role of the teachers in society, not teaching you, skills of diplomacy and warfare and legislation and history and politics, but teaching you what is the dharma. Therefore, Prabhupada wanted a Varnashram college in each center, so you could learn the dharma. And if you're doing your duty according to that dharma, if you actually become expert in the dharma has intrinsically purifying elements in it. Everyone's dharma, if done according to dharma, has to connect you to Krishna in some way. Okay, so let's say that somebody naturally is a scientist. If they're trained to do science for the benefit of society, even if they're trying to do it for the benefit of the biosphere and the universe, who's the universe? Krishna. So if they're thinking, let me study science so that the universe will be happy, they may not realize the universe is Krishna, but it is. So if people are trained, Prabhupada wrote that. There's a book that wasn't published until after Prabhupada left the planet about the talks between Ramananda Roy and Mahaprabhu. And Srila Prabhupada says that, even for ordinary people, Varnashram means that you see that you're a part of the universal body of the Lord, and you're working for the benefit of the Vishwarup. And I was like, wow, that's something you can teach everybody. That's something you can give to everyone. And there's a lot of people already inclined in that way, that we want to see our work as part of the whole. How do we work with the whole ecological system, the whole biosphere, the whole universe, cosmos? How can I work in harmony with the cosmos? And part of that has to involve yajna. Evam Pavaritam Chakram. Krishna is talking about this moving chakra, this cycle of where nature takes and gives and takes and gives and takes and gives and takes and gives. And so if you train people according to their dharma, you train them, you're taking, you also have to give. Now, such people may not come to pure devotion, but they'll become purified, they'll become elevated, and at some point they'll be able to take the pure devotion. One class I was listening to the other day, Prabhupada said, get everyone to at least be Kanista Adhikari. It's a very easy way to do it. I say this a lot. If you go to people in general and you say, how would you like to do a daily 3-hour spiritual practice in a tradition that's not your own? I don't think that would be a very good marketing strategy. Or like I used to do in O'Hare Airport, the first couple of weeks that I was in the movement, running up to people with Back to Godhead and say, here's a magazine about loving God. But most people weren't getting on or off a plane thinking about, how can I love God more? It wasn't appealing to them. I mean, think about all the benedictory verses in the Bhagavatam. They're interesting, aren't they? Somebody sometime should compile a list of all the benedictory verses in the Bhagavatam, all the Stuti-palas. But if you go up to most people in the world, I mean, unless they're deep, deep, deep Tamagun people, you go up to most people in the world and say, how would you like to have a way of maintaining yourself that will be the best expression of yourself, where you'll get the kind of prosperity that really enriches you, that you want to joyfully share with others, and that your work is providing real purpose and meaning? Would most people say, yeah, I want that? I mean, ashram dharma is a little trickier, that you might have to say, you know, how would you like to have satisfying relationships? And how would you like to have satisfying relationships that are appropriate to the various stages you go through in life? You have to be a lot vaguer about ashram dharma, because I don't think that's quite as appealing in 2020. But so it's something that everybody already wants. Everybody already wants prosperity. Everybody wants to be authentically themselves. Everybody would like to have prosperity in a way that they're their authentic self. And all human beings want meaning and purpose, again, unless they're super intolerant. So that's your natural Shastric bridge to bhakti. Because at a certain point, it becomes obvious that unless you actually have bhakti, you're not going to fully experience. Is that all right? It's an and, it's not an or. Anything else? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Okay,